I was paddling along, and suddenly there's a guy on shore, and I hear him through the wind. I hear him cupping his sort of mouth, and he's going, "Do you want coffee? Do you want coffee?" And I thought to myself, whoa, what is this? So I paddled over and met a wonderful guy who I'm going to try to look up and talk to again, who made coffee and brought it out to me. And, just kind of little things like that make your trip special.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Teich.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steinecker and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Community Foundation in support of the Adirondack Community Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities. My parents watched the Food Network. There was a 3-year stretch. Maybe I'm.
There's definitely a heyday of the Food Network. I will give you that.
For sure. I feel like my parents watched it for a 3-year chunk, constantly. But to my recollection, as much as my parents enjoyed cooking, they never tried a single recipe from Rachel Ray or Emeril Lagasse.
I was just going to bring up Emeril Lagasse. They did not kick it up a notch.
No, they didn't. They knew all the catchphrases. They were excited about it. They both loved EVOO and the BAM and whatever. But to the best of my knowledge, they never cooked a single thing. We always had steak and hamburgers and pork chops and chicken and biscuits and these 5 essential meals at our house. Nothing fancy ever came from those television shows.
Shout out to North Country resident Rachel Ray
yes.
here, because there was a period where one of our staples that Gretchen and I made, and this was largely before kids, or maybe before our first child started eating solid foods or something like that. But Rachel Ray had a recipe in her 30-minute meals show, and one of the 3 or 4 30-minute meals cookbooks that we still own to this day for something called Portuguese chicken.
I'm in.
Which was it was supposed to be, I think it was based on a recipe that Portuguese fishermen liked, presumably while they were not eating their catch. But it was.
When they're on shore.
I'll share that recipe with you later, because it was a delightful recipe that we have probably not made in 15 years.
After the
maybe I'll make it tonight.
You should. And I'll try it too. Send me the recipe. After that chunk of time watching Food Network, I don't know what came next. There's just a black hole in my memory. But the cooking shows never totally left our television. They were in somewhat regular rotation. And the last cooking adjacent thing that I remember watching. This is very cooking adjacent.
That would be a good name for a show, actually, in the Food Network.
So, televangelism.
Yes, I'm
You're a big fan of televangelism.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
I honestly kind of love it.
It's pretty. There was a period in my college life, I think, where we watched some televangelists, especially the ones that would crawl around on the stage on the donation letters and bless them. And,
really?
Yeah.
Okay, I never saw anything as extra as that. But the thing that I don't even know why. It was just me and my dad. We were up late watching TV. It might have been around the holidays. And was it Billy Graham? No, it wasn't Billy Graham. It was Billy
Bob Thornton?
No, it was Tammy and...
Oh, Jim and Tammy. Tammy Faye Baker.
Yes, so it was Jim Baker.
Yeah.
So it was Jim Baker doing a solo show because Tammy is no longer with us.
Right.
And he had this panel of people on stage. And again, I don't know why me and my dad were watching this, just scrolling through 1,000 channels on DirecTV or whatever. And we stumble upon this televangelism network, and Jim Baker is on stage with a panel of people, and they've got bowls of food in their hands. And they're just going, oh my God, isn't this the most amazing mac and cheese and beef stew that you've ever had? And this is, I think, just before 2010, and there were all these predictions that the world was going to end in 2010. So what they were selling were emergency preparedness buckets of food. And for a love gift of $200, you could be sent X number of buckets of food. So it was just this freeze-dried stuff and basically army rations. And none of it looked edible at all. But, of course, everybody in the audience is just chewing it up, and they just looks like the best, Gordon Ramsay meal they've ever had in their lives. That was the last cooking adjacent thing I remember watching with my dad.
So you go back to Emeril Lagasse, right?
Yes.
Did anybody ever actually make the stuff that was the thing? Like he was an entertainer. I guess he still is an entertainer. And while you might take what he was doing as some kind of inspiration, like the whole thing with cooking shows that made Rachel Ray so good was she led you to believe that the stuff that she was making, you could make in your own kitchen. Whereas, your Emeril Lagasse's, your Gordon Ramsay's, your guys like that, like they had the most stocked kitchens. And the thing that always blows me away about those shows is like, the dirty pots and the dirty dishes, they just disappear. There's no point in those shows. It's like, where do I put this?
Right.
Like, I have
my
no
kitchen
more
is
room
only
in my
so
kitchen,
big.
Right? Like, where do I get my stagehand to remove these dirty dishes?
Absolutely. Aaron and I have a small kitchen. We like to cook together, but after about 3 pots, it's like, okay, we overextended ourselves a little bit. Let's dial it back for the next recipe.
So, the thing about the guy that I talked to this week on Northwards, Ethan Shanty,
Yes.
is that I did not ask him at all about what he ate during his journey.
But you guys did reflect on him stumbling upon the group of people that was making teeth.
That's right.
And teeth are generally an important part of a balanced meal.
Yeah, right, exactly. And also he does talk about the guy that offered him coffee.
That's right. Okay.
So we're teasing you now.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Pete Lourie, we interviewed him like a year and a half ago, maybe, about the anniversary of his book that came out on his solo canoe trip down the Hudson River, like
Right.
the entire length of the Hudson River from the headwaters in the Adirondacks all the way to New York City, where the Hudson empties into the ocean.
Cannot even imagine what that journey is like.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of portaging, and there are rapids that he had to get around or go through. I guess it wasn't entirely a solo trip. He had some people with him at various points along the way, but it was very much a self-directed. And as far as he knew, he was the first, recent person to have done it. There were no records of, there are thoughts that Native Americans had probably done it at some point.
But he was the first person in modern recorded history who had taken on this kind of a journey.
Yeah.
So it was really incredible.
And it was like 35 years ago, 1990. And since then, some other people have. Yeah, 1990 is in fact 35 years ago, Ethan.
Even though I know that my age is 37 and I was born in 1988, the fact that you just said that. You said 35 years ago, and I was like, oh, yeah, 1970.
Yeah, right, exactly. Back when Grover Cleveland was president. So he wrote this book about this journey that was really the seminal point in his life. He had a career before that, and he certainly had a career after that, but sort of everything that he's done since then has been informed by that experience, by writing the book. He wrote a children's book based on it. He's talked about it, to various groups for years. And then the book has been in print. The adult book has been in print ever since. So anyway, he did that, and when we talked to him a year and a half ago, he was sort of in the beginning stages of thinking, maybe I should do this trip again. And then he did the trip again this year, back in the late summer, early fall. There is not a book that is out about it, but he kept a very detailed journal that he shared with me with lots of pictures, and I asked him if he'd be willing to share the story of this recreated journey and how it differed from the original to our audience. And so I had a chance to catch up with Pete Lourie, who joined us on the line from his home in Vermont. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Oh, great. This is a wonderful show. I love being back.
Well, so, okay, remind us, for people who maybe didn't hear the first interview or haven't heard you talk about this trip or read your book, this original trip you took in 1990 was a big deal. What did it mean to your life since?
Yeah, I was living at home in Beacon with 1-year-old Susanna, and I was teaching high school English in Dobbs Ferry, and I needed a project, mostly because I'm restless, and had the idea for canoeing the Hudson River. The fact that somebody maybe had never done it before at that point didn't enter my mind, didn't really, wasn't the main thrust of the trip. It was really to get out of the house and have an adventure. And I didn't know a lot about the Hudson at the time. We lived on the Hudson, and I had lived in Garrison and traveled up and down it on the roads, but I had never really been on it. And so I did some research, and I found out that I could probably paddle in one canoe all the way from the beginning at Lake Tier of the Clouds, up in the Adirondack Mountains on Mount Marcy, to Manhattan in about 3 weeks. And so I set off and did that as a 38-year-old. One of my first big adventures. I'd already been in Africa and the Amazon, but this was my first big adventure while a married man. And so I did the trip, and 5 years later, it came out with an adult book called River Mountains from Syracuse University Press. But I did a children's book also, and so I was up and down the river, really from New York City all the way up to Glens Falls, doing school programs. And that was one of the great joys of my life. So in a way, it was a trip for many reasons that defined the adventurous life. And I went on to write, another 26 books, mostly for kids. And I think it was the Hudson River trip that kind of made it happen.
Right. You always sort of carried that experience with you, regardless of what you were doing after that.
Yeah, because, it was a full-fledged adventure. I mean, one of the things I have found is when I decide I want to do a book for kids, for highlights for children's book publishing house, Boys Mills Press, I would go to the editor and say, I'd like to go to Tierra del Fuego and write about Darwin and Magellan, or I'd like to go to the Aztecs, or I'd like to go to Palenque and write about the Maya. So I would kind of jump in and do a quick, almost journalistic thing, and then sort of forget all about what I'd learned. And it was fun because they were 48-page books. I learned how to take photography, to use a camera, and so it was a lot of fun. But this one I lived with for so long, and not only researched well in advance of going, but afterwards and ever since. And so I've been up and down the river and learning about it, and just find so many people to talk to and learn from. And so it's such a rich experience that I was able to mine and keep mining even now.
Well, so then, was there a little piece of you, as you thought about doing this again, that was concerned about going back? It occupied this place in your memory that another trip could never live up to?
Yeah, that in part it was. I'll tell you about how how it came out, because in a way that might be true. I mean, there's nothing like first love, And when you're on the river for the first time and you don't have access to a car or a truck or anything, you're really in it, and you're learning everything. Everything is new. So I worried that it might not live up to that standard. But there were so many other reasons for doing it, and I'll get into those in a minute. But I think that I needed to. So what happened was I was walking in the mountains of Tucson, the Tucson Mountains in the west of Tucson, and I suddenly had the idea for going back to the river, because I was thinking, what does an older guy do when they're not writing any more children's books and maybe not teaching anymore as I was, and then I suddenly had this idea of going back to a river. So the idea was not to go to a new place. I mean, I have a friend who said, why would you do that? Why not go back? Why not go to a new river? Well, I've been going to new rivers, so to speak, metaphorically, for a long time. And the idea of going back seemed to me just a wonderful opportunity to see what had changed and how I had changed. And because it was really within those 35 years of having a 1-year-old at home and canoeing the river in 3 weeks the first time, and this September going back and doing it for a second time, it's those 35 years that we have as a window for our whole lives. That's where I wrote all my books. That's where I did my adventures. That's where I did my teaching. I raised kids. Now they're off and doing well. And so what would it be like afterwards? And yeah, I was definitely worried that it might not happen, that maybe as a 73-year-old I couldn't do it. There were plenty of people that said to me that it it seemed like a young man's trip, and for an old man, or an old man trying to do a young man's trip. And I think to some extent that's true. I didn't do it to prove to myself that I could do it, although I certainly wondered whether or not I could. So going back offered an opportunity to see the river fresh and in a new light from maybe some little wisdom that I'd learned along the way.
So it wasn't a new river, but you were able to almost treat it like it was something new.
Yeah, because the old saying is you can't put your foot in the same river twice. It really, really is a new river in the sense that I discovered the things I discovered were all new. Things that I thought would be where they weren't. And the width of the river at 3 miles wide at Haverstraw is like much more like an ocean than I had remembered. The tugs were slightly faster and a little more dangerous. I mean, it felt like a new river in many ways, and strangely, I felt like I wasn't on the same river. So it was a little kind of off, sort of weird and strange to go back.
Well, and if I remember the first trip and your preparation for it, you didn't do a lot.
Yeah.
You sort of it was the idea that you kind of get into shape by doing it. How did you approach this one 35 years older?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question because my wife said to me, back in Beacon when I was 37, how come you're not training for this thing? And I said, well, I'll just get strong as I go. And, at that age, you can sort of assume that might happen because, you're paddling 20 miles a day, 25, depending on how many tides you take later on, maybe 30, 35, you can do it. This time round, I took the same attitude, but I was out in Lake Champlain doing 7 or 8 mile trips, just trying to be in my light canoe and in big waves and a wide sort of water body. But then I got COVID, so the training came down to 0, and then I did 1 or 2 miles a day for 2 days before I left. But it is true that when you start at the upper river, where in September you can't really run the whitewater, so I did that section in a different way by hopping on rail bikes out of North Creek. But once you get on the river, it's still a pretty gentle river in Stony Creek, Warrensburg, and you move your way down through Luzerne and then through the Champlain Canal. It's not wildly challenging. And I did fewer miles. So I do 9, 11 up there and maybe end up doing 17 miles total on the lower estuary.
Well, yeah, it seemed like you put sort of fewer pressures on yourself with this trip.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, I wanted to have fun too. I didn't, this wasn't just to go out and sort of document or bookend my life, but it really was to have fun. And I know so many people along the river, and I met so many new people, not just on the trip, but before and afterwards. Now I'm still meeting incredible people. So whether it's a lock tender or, and I know you're going to ask questions about this because it really is about the people, and almost everybody who writes about rivers writes about that. It's a wonderful challenge with the wind in your face and the waves are huge, et cetera, and you've got a portage here and there, but the people along the way are the true treasure of any river, really.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to get to that because that was one of the most memorable parts of your initial book about that trip 35 years ago. Do you find that the sort of the nature of people who exist along the Hudson River still is distinct in the way that it was in 1990?
That's a really good question because in some ways people everywhere are interesting and distinct. But I do think that along the river, people who appreciate the river, the people like this time, I met a lot more people at so-called yacht clubs or boat clubs and rowing clubs and paddling clubs, and these are people that really are dedicated to the river, and they have a bond, and you bond with them as soon as you meet them. But the lock tenders and the other people you meet along the way, are very similarly attached to the water, but they're the new people I met are just as interesting and fascinating and have their own stories to tell about the river that are slightly different than the first time. And I was able to meet people that I knew before. So Peter Barton from the Garnet Mine, I was able to travel with him on the rail bikes around North Creek. And then his son took pictures. Cal, 25-year-old son, took pictures up on the canal and up on the upper river.
He
And
was
then on
he
the
was your
last
he was
day,
your paparazzi, as
he
you put
was. He
it.
was
Yeah.
my paparazzo. Yeah, and it was my only last time I had done it in 1990. I had agreed with John Cronin, the riverkeeper, to do PR along the way, and I did lots of stops and photographs and interviews and stuff. To me, this was the way to do it, which was none of that. So when I arrived in Manhattan, there was just my one paparazzo. Cal was there taking pictures as I passed the Statue of Liberty, but he did a lot of photography on the first 7 days or so on the upper river, but I was able to meet people like Peter Barton, and then Ernie LaPrairie, my paddling partner, traveled with me for a while. So I was, and Peter Bishop of the wonderful scene that I like so much in the 1990 version of the river trip, River of Mountains, where I meet these people making false teeth at Feeder Dam, and Peter Bishop's still there, the son, and we had a wonderful reunion. I hadn't seen him in 35 years.
I always felt like that scene in the 1990 version was like a strange dental version of Heart of Darkness.
Yeah. the horror.
Right, exactly.
No, it was really it's so wonderful to meet people like Peter. I hadn't gotten to know Peter the son, who had just been out of the Navy for a while and worked in these making dentures before the business sort of went in a different digital direction, until this time. And I was able to meet him and his wife and his daughter and her husband. Oh my gosh, just the salt of the earth.
Well, and he's doing kind of an interesting. He's doing like wood carvings of the river, right?
Yeah, he knows that upper river above the feeder dam, Big Bay, Big Boom area so well that he's able to draw on wood and outline all the old little canals that feed into the Champlain and the feeder canal that basically were used to get around the logs so that the loggers could get those logs into the right chutes to go to the right sawmills when they were brought down from the spring log drives. And he knows all this stuff that I don't think anybody really talks about very much.
You referenced Cal and his photography, which happened sort of for like a week early in the trip, and then at the very end as well. And the thing that struck me when I got to see some of these pictures, or all of these pictures, is you really do look like you're having a great time.
Oh, thanks, Mitch. I did. I was having a great time, and there were a few challenges here and there, but it took a month. So I left on September 1st from Vermont, and I didn't come back till the 29th. I arrived on Jersey. This time I ended at Liberty State Park across from the Battery. I thought it was more a metaphorically interesting sort of thing to go down the western shore where the sun sets as an older man and look over and see the vibrant east side of the river where I had gone when I was a younger man. But so I ended it at Liberty State Park. But to get back on the river for 28 days, the freedom and the feeling of I don't know. It's just for a restless person, it is the most satisfying thing I think I've ever done.
Do you feel like you were doing this to learn something more about the river 35 years later, or were you trying to learn something more about yourself?
Yeah, I'd say a combination of both. Especially, yes, I wanted to, and I am learning. The river has changed. I mean, it's gotten cleaner. There are parks. When I did it the first time in Beacon, there was the Nabisco plant and lots of old industrial stuff. And now it's a big park, and they're renting kayaks. And I mean, the amount of work that Scenic Hudson and the various Riverkeeper and other Clearwater, the amount of work that they have done, and the preservation through parks and parks department in New York State. just is amazing. So to see now I'm not saying it's totally clean, and it's probably not great to swim, although people do. I myself probably wouldn't. There are these times when the water overflows from storm drainage in the sewer treatment plants, and sometimes you can get sick, not knowing that had just happened the day before or in a storm or something. But the river is cleaner. It's still got a long way to go. The love of the river was defined for me. Oddly enough, I was doing research before the trip, and I was at a place called Cuppy Coffee, Kuppi, in Edgewater, New Jersey. And I met this guy named Kevin Kim, who owns the coffee house. And Kevin said, "Yeah, when I was a kid, I read this book about a guy canoeing the river, children's book. I was in the sixth grade." And I said, "Oh, that was me." And he said, "Ever since, I've just thought about the river. I run the river. He's a long distance runner. He runs the river, and his passion for the river and running all the way from Edgewater up to Alpine and then all the way up to the Mario Cuomo Bridge, the Tappan Zee, and is just so legion that to get out and be free on water and then to meet people that have the same passion for a river is so satisfying. So when you come back, it's kind of hard because you come back to the regular routine. The regular routine is great, but it's not the same. So you almost, I feel like I might be doing this the rest of my life. If I could maybe do it every year. I mean, part of me feels like I'll be like Rafa Nadal for the French Open. I'll just keep doing the Hudson River. Feels a little bit like Sisyphus and his stone, actually.
Well, that's how you end the book. I call it a book. I mean, you shared with me your journal of doing this,
Right.
which raises the question: are you hoping to share this story beyond this interview with people who might also benefit from it?
I hope to, but I don't know exactly what form that might take. I mean, part of me thinks that I don't want to just do another rapid by rapid, lock by lock story. I don't necessarily want to go into the fascinating history only. So I don't know. It'll have to be if it's right, and maybe a certain amount of personal. I mean, when you read The Snow Leopard by Peter Matheson, you realize that in that book he did more personal sort of stuff than he's did in a lot of his books, and it's probably one of his best, if not the best. But other people object to that, So, too much personal stuff, not enough river. You know what I mean? So, how it all kind of plays out, I don't know. I really don't know.
Maybe it's a memoir of the river or your relationship with it. Maybe you do need to do it every year for another few years and turn that into the book.
Yeah, I might, because I think what I'm going to do is take my tandem canoe with me this time next year, next spring and summer and fall, and start to paddle with people. There's a lot of people I need to go back and talk to. If I do a little portrait on Ed Ferguson and the chief at Lock 8, I've spent time with him, but I need to go back and spend more time with him because I would like to write 4 pages that were really well done about people that I meet along the river.
One of the defining characteristics of the 1990 book was that you were, as far as you could tell, the first person, or at least the first person maybe in modern history to have accomplished the journey from the headwaters of the Hudson all the way to its conclusion. Not that many people have done it since.
No, but it's interesting. A couple of my students have done that. They did it on rafts. They did it with video cameras. Met a guy who just did it, John Henkelman at University of New Hampshire. He's a 38-year-old guy. I just went over to Portsmouth to meet him a couple of days ago, and he really slogged it out in very dry weather through the whitewater and all the way down. So it is a thing. It's been people who paddle have wanted to do the Hudson long before I even was born. Whether anybody actually did it before me, I don't know. But certainly since that people have done it on paddle boards, they've done, the one guy swam it, the guy Blair from England, he swam the whole thing. There's sections you have to get out. You can't swim if there's too many rocks. But so it's interesting. That's not the most interesting aspect of the trip for me, that I might have been the first, or that people do it in record time or anything. It's really, at this age, it's wonderful to stop. Well, let me give you an example of just the sort of serendipity of some. I'm paddling along. I love coffee. I love coffee. I mean, I have a passion for coffee. I don't drink anymore, so coffee is like, the one thing I love. I love a lot of things in life, but that's one big one. And so I was paddling along kind of section of the upper river. I don't remember exactly where I was. And suddenly there's a guy on shore, and I hear him through the wind. I hear him cupping his sort of mouth, and he's going, "Do you want coffee? Do you want coffee?" And I thought to myself, whoa, what is this? So I paddled over and met a wonderful guy who I'm going to try to look up and talk to again, who made coffee and brought it out to me. And, just kind of little things like that make your trip special.
It is interesting to think, though, that having done this twice now, and learning what you have and sort of contributing to people's understanding both of navigating the river, but of the nature of the river itself, that your own history is kind of wrapped up in the modern history of the Hudson River.
Yeah, I think that may be the link that I'm looking for. Because I spend a lot of time focusing on the people. Peter Malinowski, who has the Billion Oyster Project in Manhattan, in New York Harbor. I just talked to John Adams, who started NRDC, who did so much work for the Hudson. I met the new river keeper, Luis Melendez, who's just taken over from John Lipscomb. You get wrapped up in these wonderful people, and sometimes I also need to start thinking about the link between this river and what it is for me and my growth as a person. I think I'll bring that in if I can.
Do you feel like at this point in time, is the Hudson a better place than it was 35 years ago?
Oh my gosh. I feel that immensely. I mean, it's such a treasure. To go from the mountains, from a little lake way up in the Adirondacks, through one of the most beautiful parks in the country, the Adirondack Park, for 80 some odd miles, and then paddle a couple hundred more miles, and you're in Manhattan. I mean. It's a special river anyway, but if you add the kinds of work that people have been doing to care for it and steward it, it's just it is America's. I think Moyers did a book on America's First River, he called it, and it really is one of the great stories of rivers for all time, for anywhere in the world, really.
Well, Pete Lourie, I feel so lucky that we get to have you share your love for it with us, and congratulations on the second trip, and let's talk again.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Mitch. Really, really nice.
Pete Lourie is the author of River of Mountains, the journal of his original journey down the entire 300-plus miles of the Hudson River from its headwaters in the Adirondacks down to New York City. We talked to him about that about a year and a half ago. He recently redid that trip as a much older person, and as you heard in the interview, he's not sure what he's going to do with that just yet, but he wrote a journal that he shared with me, took lots of pictures, and we will share some of those pictures at our website, ncpr.org/northwards. Ethan Shanty, our producer, back with us in the studio. Ethan, are there things that, from much earlier in your life that you have gone back to revisit that you maybe had some qualms about, like, would it really be the same?
Yeah, the most prominent part of my entire life has been playing music, and I've never really stopped doing it. But I have had a couple of periods of relative inactivity where the band either took a break from touring because, road conditions were bad or we had life stuff going on. And
Took a break from touring because road conditions were bad?
Well, like in the winter.
Oh, okay, that kind of a break from touring.
That's what I meant,
Not
yeah.
like a 6-year break
No.
from touring. Like, I don't know if these roads are going to get any better.
Well, if we were a Pennsylvania band,
Potholes.
yeah. If we were based in Pennsylvania, that would definitely be the case. But no, I mean, like, we always pretty much stop touring in the winter because we don't like traveling, and it's unpredictable. And invariably, anytime we kind of get back into the swing of things, it's changed for me like a little bit. And a couple of years ago, I really realized that my priorities had shifted. When I was a teenager and in my 20s, it was just like everything else is secondary and music comes first. The only thing that I really care about is writing music with my band and being on the road as much as we possibly can. Could never do it as much as I really wanted to, but, we got out there pretty often. And then in the last few years, I realized, I really like being home. It's not just the creature comforts, but also, my partner is my best friend and I really hate being away from her for too long. And it has gotten to the point where it's like, I'm not willing to kind of put my body on the line to do this. I can be.
Why don't you bring her along on the road?
She doesn't want to do that, man. Being in a van with 4 farty, gross dudes for 2 weeks. Would you want to do that?
No. Not
Okay,
at all.
there you go. So I think anytime I kind of get back into the swing of playing music, I have a different perspective on it. And I think now that I'm getting closer to 40, I have a healthier relationship than I did when I was in my 20s. Yeah, what about you?
For me, the example that springs to mind is pizza. There have been there have been a couple of pizza places in my life that, in places that I have lived, that I have thought, oh my God, this is the best pizza I will ever have. Mm-hmm. And you move away from those places and you think, was the pizza really that good? And one of them was Mabe's Pizza in Decorah, Iowa.
Okay.
And you can't really describe what makes a pizza good to you, but like the combination of the crust and the flavor of the sauce.
It's like a song. Like why do I like this? I don't know. I just do.
Right. And it was the first pizza I remember liking, despite the fact that it was square. I have like a bias against square pizza.
I don't blame you.
It's like, what the heck? Like, you couldn't make this round. Anyway, so there was that. And then years later, I moved to Potsdam, New York, and I became a fan of Sergi's Pizza. Mm-hmm. And that too, I thought, wow, this is, back in the day, the mid-'90s when I lived here, it was like the combination of their sauce and their really thick-cut pepperoni and whatever. And I thought, was it really that good? And in more recent years, I had the chance to go back to Decorah, Iowa with my kids. And we went to that pizza place, which actually hosted my going-away party when I left there
no kidding.
in 1994.
Wow.
And you know what? The pizza really was good.
I love to hear that. That's amazing.
And then we moved back to Potsdam, where I had left in 1998, and Sergi's Pizza is still quite excellent.
Man, that's awesome. I love hearing that. Aaron and I had this fantastic pizza when we were in Ottawa this weekend. I can't remember the name of the place.
I need to know that.
I feel so bad. As soon as we're off, I will text Aaron and find out what it was. But we liked it so much that when we were coming home from Ottawa, so we had this pizza place on Saturday night, and it's just like the crust was really thin and the sauce was like a little sweet and the meat that they put on it was just a little tiny bit spicy, and then it had a drizzle of hot honey on it.
Oh, I'm a big fan of the hot honey on
which
pizza.
Like I've had before and I haven't loved, but they did it just the right amount, the perfect combination. And when we were driving back from Ottawa, we were like, what do you want to do for dinner tonight? And she was like, you want to try to recreate that pizza that we had? And it was amazing. So now we're just going to make pizzas at home all the time.
You have a good recipe for crust?
I can't tell you.
All right, but you can tell us who produces this show.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, produced, and edited by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me. I'm Ethan Shanty. Bill Hanel is our digital guy. Caitlin Kelly handles social media, and Doyle Dean is our production manager. Our theme music is by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. To find out more about this show, listen to past conversations, and support the station, visit ncpr.org/northwards. This is NCPR, North Country Public Radio.
That's a spicy meatball.